approaching final enlightenment, we will see that even entering jhana is a burden of mind. The mind will release all states that it previously sought, even the most subtle ones. Once it lets go, the current flows back to the mind itself. This mind is not an ordinary mind, it's the knowing mind. In the texts, it is called the Mahagusala Citta, composed of wisdom, arising on its own, unprompted. It is the pinnacle of wholesome minds. In the texts, it explains two such minds. Of the 80 plus minds depicted, or the 120 plus minds if further detailed, only two are of truly exemplary quality. They are the Mahagusala minds. They are without craving, without aversion, and without delusion. They are light, gentle and delicate, nimble, not lethargic, and know all phenomena without interfering with them. Those are the most wholesome of minds. And they also are comprised of wisdom. Some minds are wholesome but don't have wisdom. They are just still and senseless. Some people train to achieve a mind that is empty and still. They think that is good. It is good compared to a restless one, but it is inferior to a mind developing genuine wisdom. Luangpor Dun wouldn't praise a still and empty mind. It doesn't suffice. We need to develop wisdom until the truth is seen. Luangpor called it the mind seeing the mind with crystal clarity. Seeing the mind with crystal clarity, he is talking about the knower mind that we thought was so good and special, the most special thing in the world, is still suffering. The truth is seen to this extent, and then the knower is let go of. That's called knowing the mind with crystal clarity. The mind releases the mind. Once the release occurs, the mind transforms. It becomes the Dhamma element, or knowing nature. Not really a knowing nature, because the nature of things is to arise and fall. Nature implies birth and death. Here the mind reaches authenticity, true mind, true Dhamma. Each master has a different name for it. They didn't all read the texts. The late Supreme Patriarch was well versed in the text. He called it the consciousness element, the genuine element of knowing. Ajahn Mahabua called it the Dhamma element, the element of Dhamma. They were all correct. Some masters called it simply heart, such as Luangpor Man and Luangpor Tet. Luangpor Dun called it the one mind, like in Zen. Ajahn Buddhadasa called it the original mind. These are all the same phenomenon. It is when the mind knows the truth of the five aggregates with crystal clarity and releases them. The knower mind is released along with them because it is a component of the aggregates. All that is left is what transcends suffering. There are two types of aggregates, those of clinging and suffering, and those beyond suffering. The world transcendent mental states are beyond suffering. These states don't suffer and aren't suffering. In the case of the early enlightenments, stream enterers once and non-returners, such a mind is experienced and then it fades away immediately. For the Arahant, the Arahant path mind arises and falls, and the Arahant result mind arises and falls. There is still a rising and falling. But after that, there is a new type of knowing state that is attained. There are no more fluctuations. Saying no fluctuations isn't exactly right. Some moments have happiness, and some moments have equanimity. Some moments are simply peaceful, and others contain wisdom. Arahants don't have wisdom at all times. Some moments are still, but each moment has a similarity. Nothing can perturb the mind ever again. Nothing can cause any disturbance. Any mind that has not reached this point still wavers and can be perturbed. There is still craving for wisdom, happiness, and such things. But the mind that has practiced to the end has no more craving. It is free of all forming and fabricating. What I am talking about isn't just philosophy or abstractions. These are Dhamma principles that the Buddha taught us, and he told us to tell others to try out and see. The Dhamma is something we suggest to others to try out. We invite people to try it. I am inviting you to try and see. Is Dhamma true or not? The Buddha didn't teach us to believe him. He taught us to practice and see if what he said is true. We prove it in our own experience. How do we try it out? We have to incline our mind back to ourself. We tell others to try and see. And how is that done? By inclining inward, studying our own body and mind, mental and physical states. In the end, we will know for ourselves what is true. Once it is seen, there is complete certainty in what is true. There is no hesitation or doubt in the least about Buddhism. Sometimes when great masters meet each other, even though they have no doubt at all, they'll ask playfully, "Do you still have any doubt about Buddhism?" It is a way of speaking. If we listen in, we'll think they are conversing normally, but really they are asking, "Have you completed the path?" If the work isn't complete, there will be no end to doubt. When masters speak to each other, they may do so in a roundabout way as to avoid listeners creating conflict. Non-practitioners listening in can easily sin by accusing enlightened monks of breaching the discipline rules. This happened to Luangpor Dun once. A group of monk practitioners intended to report Luangpor to the discipline authorities. They took exception to his speaking about the original mind, the one mind, and his teachings about watching the mind. They wanted to accuse him of falsely proclaiming his attainments. So they approached Luangta Mahabua to assist them in the prosecution. Luangta said, "No, they are messing with the wrong monk." Thankfully, the group discontinued their motion. They were smart enough to know what Luangta meant, and they didn't go through with it. So when the masters speak, they often do so very indirectly as to avoid issues when teaching. Teaching directly is dangerous. There are many bad people these days. We speak in riddles and rhymes. When teaching monks without other listeners around, however, monks are allowed to speak directly. Monks are pushed much harder in their practice than lay people. When still a layperson, the master may praise their practice, but once they ordain, they are told to start over. They may have practiced well for a layperson, but not good enough for a monk. Lay people get easier lessons. The monks have it tougher. The Dhamma that I teach, I learned from the masters ever since I was a layman. They taught me humble Dhamma, and some masters, Luangpor Pramote especially, told me to spread the teachings. I taught even prior to monkhood because I was following my teacher's orders, not because I decided to do so on my own. Luangpor Pramote told me there was a vast number of people who were similar to me. It would be unfortunate if they didn't have the opportunity to learn this Dhamma. He was referring to modern people, thinkers that appeal to logic and reason. Opinion temperament, they're called. The practice appropriate for opinion temperament people is watching the mind. When Luangpor Dun taught me, he said that in the future the practice of watching the mind will flourish in the cities. These days, we are primarily an urban society. Agricultural societies don't even make up 10% of our country, if you look at the production statistics. We are living in urban times. And city people are incessant thinkers. The appropriate practice is watching our own minds. Luangpor Dun knew this, and that's why he declared watching the mind will flourish in cities. Luangpor didn't teach me anything else. He focused on me watching the mind. Luangpor Pramote told me to share the teachings. If he didn't, I'd relax on my own and my life would be a breeze. Instead, I work these aggregates hard, spreading Dhamma. On my own, I am infinitely happy. No need to speak. Speaking sucks energy. Teaching us here isn't so bad. In the past, I taught people with strong opinions, and it would be a fight to try to teach them. I've let that go. I don't have the strength. Whatever you want to believe, go ahead. I'll tell you how it is, and then believe what you will. I provide an opportunity. Us here have listened to the Dhamma. It is our job now to practice. Learning to watch our mind requires understanding that there are two practices. There is Samatha and Vipassana. If we watch our mind but focus on emptiness, that is Samatha. If we focus attention on the knower mind, that is Samatha. If we try to not focus on emptiness or the knower mind and trying to do nothing, that is Samatha too. Watching the mind, where we lower our energy until we barely have any perception, that is Samatha too. So watching the mind can be Samatha practice if it carries any of these four aspects. These are the four formless jhanas. We may not achieve jhana, but these aspects move us in that direction. Watching the mind and making it empty, the highest achievement will be the sphere of infinite space. If we watch the mind and hold to the knower then becomes known, and then there is a new knower, and we can hold to that. This unending process is called the sphere of infinite consciousness. If we don't hold to emptiness or consciousness, we reach the sphere of nothingness. Here we hold to nothing. And then, if we get euphoric, we can reduce our awareness to a minute amount, almost none. That is the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Therefore, if we feel euphoria when watching our minds, it is a sign we are off base. If we experience emptiness while watching the mind, we are off. Watching the mind, what then should we experience? We should see the truth of the mind. We should see the truth. And what is the truth of the mind? It is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not a self. So if we watch the mind and it is empty, still, euphoric, or nothing, that is a samatha state. Luangpor Pramote said, wisdom sees the mind like the eyes see forms. He said wisdom, not mindfulness. Samatha is bringing mindfulness to see the mind and it becomes empty. For Vipassana, mindfulness knows the mind with a stable knower, and wisdom sees the truth of the mind. Therefore, when watching the mind, don't watch it to make it empty. See the truth. The exception is when we need some rest. When our mind is tired and needs a rest, we can do some samatha and hold to emptiness, knowing full well that it is samatha. That is practicing samatha wisely. The Buddha encouraged this. The Buddha taught the things to practice most wisely are practice samatha and vipassana. Practicing samatha unwisely is not condoned by the Buddha. When we are developing wisdom and our mind tires and loses power, samatha is like charging a battery. When we are using our phone, playing online games, and watching clips and movies, it uses up the battery. When we develop wisdom, it is like using up our phone battery. It is hard work. When our batteries are dying, losing power, we rush to charge it up. That is samatha. If we can recognize when it is time for samatha, we are practicing wisely. We don't do it because we are addicted to it. Addicted to emptiness, nothingness, euphoria, we are practicing unwisely. Watching the mind and seeing it arise and fall, we'll see it as happy one moment, not so the next, then good, then bad. The happy mind arises and falls, the unhappy mind arises and falls, then greedy, angry, and deluded minds arise and fall. A good mind arises and falls, the knowing mind arises and falls, the mind at seeing arises and falls, the mind at hearing arises and falls, the mind at smelling arises and falls, the mind tasting arises and falls, the mind knowing tactile feelings arises and falls, the thinking mind arises and falls, the focusing mind arises and falls. Seeing like this is seeing the impermanence of mind. This is developing wisdom by watching the mind. We see the greedy mind come and then go. Seeing arising and falling like this is correct. Making the mind empty isn't. But once the mind is out of energy and tired, then do samatha. That is correct and appropriate. When I need a rest, I use an easy little tactic that Luangpor Pramote taught. He taught a trick to achieve samatha really quickly. Hold your breath. Give it a try. Don't breathe in first. Whatever breath is left, just hold that, and then hold on to the still feeling. Just for a moment, there is peace. And then come out of it. Come out and get back to work. That's a quick charge. Quick charges for samatha do exist. When we do it, we have about 2 hours of energy. But each time we recharge, we will be out of power faster. The battery deteriorates. So we can't use this often, only for emergencies. For example, we have a job interview and we are so stressed about it, we don't know what to do, our head is spinning. Well, then do a quick charge. There is no time to do sitting or walking meditation. Just use a natural mind. Let's try it again. Don't breathe in first. Use whatever you have now and stop breathing. If you breathe in first, it will be too tight. You won't get the rest that you wanted. Can we do it? If we can't yet, then you can try it at home. It's really useful for lay people. If our car falls off a cliff before we die, do that quick charge. At least we will have a favorable rebirth. We make the mind still and peaceful for a moment, and then we let the death happen. Then we hit the ground, the body is severely injured, and we see that the body is suffering. The mind is the knower. Seeing this way, enlightenment could happen at the moment of death. As we practice Dhamma, when it is appropriate to do samatha, then do it. But don't get hooked on empty spaces, or hooked on stillness of mind, or hooked on nothingness or euphoric states. When we do samatha meditation for energy to develop wisdom and see the arising and falling of the mind, that is correct. The happy mind arises and falls, the unhappy mind arises and falls, the greedy, angry, deluded mind arises and falls, the knowing mind arises and falls, the focusing mind arises and falls. The mind lost through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or thought arises and falls. Keep watching and wisdom will occur. We could observe from the non-self perspective too. Each type of mind is uncontrollable, can't be forced or asked into or out of being. That's non-self. It works on its own. It isn't us. Some people observe and understanding happens and the mind cries out, "Whoa, the mind isn't me." The mind can even admit a whoa. We can see the mind isn't us after believing it was for so long. This is the practice for those that observe the mind. There is a Samatha component and a Vipassana component. Not all mind observation is Samatha. Not all mind observation is Vipassana. Most who claim to observe the mind are still doing Samatha, all the while thinking it is Vipassana. The three characteristics must be seen in order for it to be Vipassana. So that is enough for today. In the rest of the talk, Luangpor Pramote just talks a little bit about the rules for entering the temple and watching for some crank callers that have happened recently asking for money, because the monks will never call you and ask for money. So that's all. Hope you enjoyed very much, and please remember to like and subscribe so I can keep doing this. Thank you so much.